Hey everyone, welcome to Post Ugly, where we talk to mental health professionals and survivors about life post trauma. Today on the show, we welcome back LaToya Smith. She is a licensed professional counselor, a therapist, and the owner of LCS Counseling based out of Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for joining us today, LaToya.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back on.
Yeah,
I'm excited about this chat.
yes, me too. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about boundaries. One of the things we hear a lot as survivors or just regular people is that we need to set boundaries. And I want to know what that actually means and what that looks like for somebody who's healing post trauma.
Yeah, I think, um, and let's be honest too, when we start off, it's not the easiest, right? I always say boundaries teach other people how to treat us.
Mm,
And one thing about a survivor of any type of abuse is like we have to learn and unlearn as we're healing, right? So there's so much that goes into that. And then just learning, okay, I have to begin to look at things from a fresh lens because I've been abused for so long, I've been violated for so long. Now I got to turn around and teach people how to treat. Like I got to learn how to treat me and how to treat myself. So I think it's a lot that goes into that. So sometimes we'll say the word boundary, and I'll admit, even as a therapist, we'll say it, and it's easier said than it depends where somebody's at. But then I think there's also a realistic expectation of the starting point,
hmm.
and it's okay to set a boundary, but then understand that sometimes I may have to go back and rework the line, right? You know, what I mean, kind of like putting a fence up around my property. Okay, you know what? Oh, I like my yard. So let me push the fence back a little bit. Let me make it a little bit taller here. Or this one I can lower, I can, see where it's at. So I think all those things are important, but like a first things first, let's take certain things into consideration. Be kind to yourself as you're setting this stuff up.
Yeah.
Some people think a boundary too is like, no, we're building cement walls, 10 feet deep. Okay, well, hey, that's okay,
Yeah.
that's the boundary you want to set. Okay. And maybe somebody else does that and it works for them, but that may not be what works for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think about it just like from my personal experience when I realized that I needed to set boundaries with even just my family, uh,
Hmm.
because a lot of the trauma that I had was wrapped around growing up and all of the things that happened during that time. And I needed that time to recover and kind of separate myself from that. So, what challenges do you think people go through when it is about setting boundaries with people who you innately want to be close to? You know, because it's
Hmm.
not easy to set a boundary with family, especially.
Mm-mm. I think the idea like, if I set this boundary, will you still love me? If I set this boundary, will we be cool? Um, if I tell you what I need, will you be frustrated and go the other way? And
Mm,
so it's a again, we're learning ourselves, we're learning how to treat ourselves, we're unlearning stuff, and especially in the mind of an abuser where um there may have, I'm not saying this for everybody, there may have been a lot of people pleasing to keep my environment safe.
mm,
Now I got to learn how to put a, this is a shift in thinking, right? So
right.
a lot of it sometimes is just fear
Mm,
of the unknown once I do or say this.
yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of us as survivors end up being people pleasers.
Hmm.
Like you said, it's one of those things where you've had to survive in some way. So you always had to say yes a lot of the time. And then finally figuring out, oh no, I have to say no. So
Hmm.
trying to find that for yourself. Do you have any practical steps
Okay.
for people to take if they're trying to set boundaries with, in particular, family or friends or other relationships that might have been impacted by trauma?
Absolutely. Um, I think, and this is what I'm learning, and like you too, like what you said, okay, dealing for myself, dealing with sexual abuse as a child, um, even spiritual abuse years past,
Mhm.
in the church I was with, um, people pleasing is huge, right? Because you want to make sure everybody else is happy. So it's hard to set that line. So one thing I've learned okay, once I shifted my thoughts, right, shifted the expectations, I need to change some things, right? So even Even if you're not even thinking, I need to put a boundary in place. Sometimes we do it without even saying and announcing the boundaries there, right? So first things first, what I came across, I can set a boundary and I don't have to let everybody else know about it. It could be for me. And maybe my boundary is I don't allow anybody else to talk to me that way.
Mm,
It doesn't mean I make a social media post. It doesn't mean I do like a TikTok video. It doesn't mean that I go to FedEx and make banners about it, right? It's the idea that, you know what, for me, from this day forward, I'm no longer allowing blank. Or, you know what, I am somebody and this is how I choose to operate and how I choose to be seen and treated. And if a person can't respect that, that's not a person that's for me. So some of that is I know what I need. Then
mhm,
there's going to be times where we're going to have conversations with people. And the first tip, we have to be very clear and direct on what we need.
mm,
Because if my boundary is, I always use this one for some reason in sessions. Because I heard somebody say this to me years ago. The person was like, I don't take phone calls after 9 p.m. Who calls my house after 9? I'm thinking, I'm up to like midnight one. Like 9 is like, what's the problem? And I would never think that's a thing. But
mm,
when I heard somebody say that, like, I can't believe my phone is ringing after 9. That's rude. I'm like, oh, well, that person was saying, he wasn't saying it directly to me, but he was just saying in general, this is a boundary that I have. But
mhm,
to me, it was foreign because I would just I can call for that, right? So an example that I use with people is if you do have a boundary where, listen, I don't take calls after 9. I try to settle myself in to go to sleep so I can wake up early, blah, blah, blah. And I pick up the phone and I call you at 9:05 and you answer, I know it's cool now because
mhm.
I feel maybe I got a special privilege. I'll just continue to call you after 9 because you answered for me, right? So that person would need to say then, hey, I need to be very clear and direct. Do not, if you call my phone after 9, I will not be answering the phone.
Yeah,
I put this up for me because I want to make sure I get a good night's rest or I want to spend time with my family. And I've had all day to tend to people, but 9 and that's my time.
yeah. And what it
So,
sounds like you're saying too is you have to figure that out for yourself. Maybe that takes a lot of time to figure out what your boundaries even are for yourself and actually
mhm,
being like
yeah,
forthcoming about it, diligent
yeah,
about it. And I think
yeah.
it's hard, right?
Oh yeah, it could definitely, yeah, it's hard to find, it can be hard. Some people are great at it. Some people are like, nope, absolutely not. No thanks. Bye. Like, you know what I mean? And that's where they're at. And I think there's other times in people that we have to adjust and see. I don't think boundaries should be cookie cutter. I think there's some things, yeah, nobody wants to be called out of their name, ideally. That point right there, ideally, nobody wants to be called out of their name. Some people will let you know that you got a syllable off, that's not my name. And some people are like, hey, whatever. But I probably deserve that, right? So I think it is when we're ready, like first things first, hey, let me be clear and direct. How can I be clear and direct?
Right.
How can I express this in a way that there's no gray? I need to let this person know what I need,
Yeah. But
right?
I feel like a lot of the time when you want to set a boundary, especially with a loved one or something like that, you do get pushback. And
Oh, absolutely.
how would you handle that?
Yeah. Somebody said that. I can't remember where the quote from comes from, and I'll probably mess it up. But it was just like, listen, nobody trips harder. Nobody gets more upset about your boundaries than somebody who benefited from you not having any. I think that's a perfect sign of the ones you get pushback from are the ones that do not like the idea. Like, how dare you? Like, I benefited from calling you whenever I needed, and I need you to pick up on the first ring. How dare you tell me I can't call after? So what happens? We've experienced this person in life, but within this example, they'll just consistently call us after 9
Mm,
because they want what they want when they want it.
right.
Right? An abuser benefits from us not having any boundaries. An abuser benefited from us when they could manipulate us, right? Lie to us and continue on the abuse. How dare we get some, confidence, or how dare we set a boundary? Because now it's attack against them, and they don't get things their way. So
Mm,
that's why I say some of these boundaries. Listen, I know what I need. I may not have. Maybe it's safe for me not to make a big old announcement and just go with it.
mhm,
And then sometimes, depending on the relationship, and the relationship is safe, I need to have this conversation with you. And I
mm,
need to be able to say, listen, I don't like when you do blank. So this is what I need for my emotional, physical, spiritual safety, whatever needs to be put in there. This is what I need this,
Mm.
or I'm putting this in place so that I can be, see, because now it's all about this is my boundary.
Right.
Boundaries teach other people how to treat me.
And I think some people might say, oh, well, then you're just being selfish. I think
Mhm.
that's definitely a term that I hear a lot of people saying when you're trying to separate yourself or when you're trying to put up some kind of just wall to help yourself. And what would you say to somebody saying, oh, you're just being selfish by not being there when I need you?
I would say sometimes, obviously, selfish, we look at it as a bad thing, a negative thing. And then I would just, I would reframe it.
Mm,
No, maybe let's not call it selfish. Maybe let's call it self-love. You
mm,
learn to love yourself more. Let's call it you know, you're valuing your self-worth. Like, I have more value than to always lower my standards to make sure that I'm spread so thin that everybody else is great. You know what I
mm.
mean? So I would reframe it. Of course, their point, they call it selfish, but when we turn and we look at it, what best benefits me, now I'm working on my self-love and my self-worth. Is it, we could just say there's some self in there, but I wouldn't call it selfish. So I think some of it, again, is reframing. But again, if I'm talking to somebody and they're not benefiting, of course there's going to be something negative attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And
Mhm.
I wanted to touch a little bit about, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about this, but you had mentioned about you as a survivor from abuse as a
Mhm.
child. And I kind of want to pivot a little bit and just
Mhm.
go into how did you come from that background to being where you are now when it
Mhm.
comes to helping other survivors go through healing?
Mhm. I think for me, it's a great question. Um, I think allowing, first and foremost, allowing myself to go through it. That's
Mm,
huge, right? Because sometimes I think we try to point people in the right. We can point in the right direction, but walk with them, and we're not fully healed yet. And not that you got to be 100% of everything, but for me personally, it was actually stepping into that, getting the healing, realizing, wait a minute, life is better over here. Like, you know what I mean, on this healed journey, than in that shame and quiet and bitter space. You know what I mean? So allowing myself to walk through it. Um, and even more so now, again, as I continue to mature at different levels in life, knowing when to be still too. You know what I mean? There's a healing part, and sometimes in the healing journey, knowing when to be still and take everything in. Okay, what's going on with me? Or what do I need in this moment? Or this feels great. Letting my guard down. Feeling safe enough to let my guard down. Okay. And sitting in that without reacting to anything else. Okay, now. Whew, this feels so good that now I want to help other people get to where I'm at.
yeah.
But I think it's very much, for me, it's been a journey, um, a beautiful journey. You know what I'm saying? Especially with when it comes to the sexual abuse, just learning different things and helping different people. And because once you're healed in a certain way, you hear people differently and you see people differently. So I always say, like, even when I do presentations and I share my story, I can see who in the room knows exactly what I'm talking about, but it's kind of, you can tell they haven't said anything. You can
Mm,
see it in the eyes. You can see how they're hanging on. You know what I mean? And I like being able to have those conversations without forcing anybody, but let other people know that there is hope.
yeah.
But they may not know it if somebody like myself or you won't share it, you
Yeah.
know? But like, first thing, okay, we gotta open up, we gotta face our own stuff before we can be like, big old boundaries. Because sometimes too, right? This is something I always say. I could put a boundary up in pain, and that may be